So welcome to this seminar organized by RETROUVEZ, the network of European researchers managed by IRIS, the French think tank. This seminar is dedicated to the space package. We are currently in a difficult time due to the situation in Ukraine. Day after day, we become aware of the need to be more autonomous in all areas. We become aware of the strengths we have to be united at European level within the framework of the European Union. And we are moving forward on this patch, which will see us increase our security, our resilience, but also our competitiveness. Earlier this week, we held a conference on the Defense Package 2. Today, we are organizing a conference on the Space Package. The Space Package covers both a proposal for a regulation on space-secure connectivity to benefit from an EU space-based secure communication system, and a communication on the development of a space traffic management capability in Europe. The Space Package proves that the European Union wants to remain a main player in the space field. It gives meaning to the defense. So it's the Defense Package 2, but space, and it is today the Space Package for which we are organizing this conference today. It also gives meaning to the analysis according to which it is necessary to increase the synergies between the civil, defense, and space industrial sectors, as proposed by the European Commission in its communication on synergy in these three sectors published 1 year ago. These two projects will undoubtedly increase the strategic autonomy of the European Union, which is becoming increasingly necessary in the light of the recent events. To talk about this topic, we will have a keynote presentation by Guillaume De La Brosse, which is Head of Unit for Space Innovation, Startups, Economics, DG Défis, and at the European Commission. And then we will have two respondents, Andrea ROTTER, Head of Division Foreign and Security Policy at the Seidel Stiftung, and Gaspard Schnitzler, which is Research Fellow at IRIS. They will interview Guillaume De La Brosse. We will then have a first round of answers from the speakers, and then I will take questions for the people attending this seminar using the writing mode of Zoom. I will therefore first give the floor to Guillaume De La Brosse.
Thank you, Jean-Pierre. Good afternoon to everybody. I'm very delighted to be with you and to have a chance to speak about the space package, to share some views and to get a conversation straight after that. But perhaps what I'd like to do is really to step back 1 minute to give you the key drivers of the space agenda at European level, to give you really what drives the agenda for the time being and what sets the priorities there. And I would say there are two big drivers when it comes to the European space agenda moving forward. The first one is resilience. Indeed, I mean, no need to dwell too much there. We see what's happening. There is a need for Europe to increase overall its resilience, and specifically in certain critical sectors, space being one of them. So here clearly space is an enabler. For many economic fields, for Europe's security, and therefore we need to enhance our resilience, including in space. So that's driver number one. The driver number two is innovation. Jean-Pierre, you said it. We have leadership in positioning, navigation, and timing with Galileo. We have leadership in Earth observation with Copernicus. But what we see as well is that we have new competitors, new competitors, including from the private sector. And therefore, if we want to remain a leader, if we want to remain in the race, innovation is a game changer, and we need to focus very much on innovation and continue investing in innovation. And of course, here we need to take advantage of the new space ecosystem that is growing up very quickly, including in Europe, to boost that innovation. So clearly, I mean, resilience and innovation are two big drivers of the agenda of the European Union on space. And it was mentioned regularly by Commissioner Breton in different speeches recently at the EU Space Conference. And this is very much in that context that we have published, after the college adoption, the space package, and it was same day as the publication of the defense package, so on the 15th of February. And as you said, the space package entails two elements, two pieces. First one is about communication and space traffic management. And a second piece is a piece of legislation, draft proposal to establish a new constellation, secure connectivity program. That would be the third EU constellation, and I'll get back to that. But first, perhaps I'll start with space traffic management, because in a way we are really in the middle of what it means. What is at the heart, very heart of this is the ability to monitor and protect space assets, our assets. As I said, I mean, space infrastructures are getting more and more critical beyond the space sector. Those infrastructures are getting critical for our daily life, for our economy, for our security. And therefore, we really need to enhance our ability to monitor what's going on in space and to be able to take decisions when there is a need to take decisions. So space traffic management is very much about this, about having the ability to have space situation awareness and have a possibility to take decisions when we need to take decisions and implement those decisions. So that stage, I mean, it's very much a communication. So it's not, here what we want to do is really to trigger reflection and develop a European approach. According to us, it makes no sense, that member states on a national basis develop standards or assets. It is very much a domain that we need to consider from a European perspective and develop an EU approach on space traffic management. So that's very much the purpose of that communication, to trigger that debate and to propose some actions, concrete actions. And I'd like to highlight two of them. The first one is developing our assets, our capabilities. We already have initial assets, the consortium, the SST, Space Surveillance and Tracking Consortium, that already exists, that delivers services, but we want to enhance that capability at European level. We want to develop new services. So clearly, the capability pillar will be very important, and we need to draw on national assets, pool national assets, but tap into the potential of a new commercial player as well. That's one of the actions that we want to pursue. The second big action is about standards. We need to define standards in the domain of space traffic management. And here, of course, so we want to trigger a debate about a possible legislation in the course of 2024 about defining standards in the field of space traffic management. In turn, of course, we need to engage with international partners because standards will have to be applied on an international basis then. So that's very much about space traffic management. What is very important is, again, to keep in mind that it's about monitoring and ability to take right decisions when it comes to space assets. So the second element of the space package is about secure connectivity. And here I'd like really to stress that it's quite historic. It's a quite historic moment for us, because, you know, it's not every day that you potentially propose the launch of a third constellation. We already have two big flagships. I mentioned them, Galileo and Copernicus. Here the plan is to equip Europe with a third constellation on telecommunication, on broadband. What's the objective? The objective is, I mean, twofold. One, to enable broadband everywhere in Europe, so no dead zone, no white spots in Europe. So really to get that internet for all. And then two, to get ultra secure services as well. And you see what's happening in Ukraine. Clearly, there are requests to get such links, such data links. So we need such an asset in Europe, which is independent and sovereign for governmental purposes. And this is what we have in mind as well with that third constellation. So here, this is very much about resilience, this constellation. And here, this is ensuring resilience through security by design. So we want a constellation that would be secure by design. And two, it's about resilience because we want to get redundancy with terrestrial networks as well. So here we want to have redundancy. So, I mean, one could say, well, why should Europe now jump in while we are going to have already, there are already constellations or you know, a deployment of constellations. Indeed, we may be a bit late, but what we want to do is to differentiate ourselves. If you look at other constellations, and the way we want to differentiate ourselves is through multi-orbital constellation. So basically, we want to have a constellation deployed on a low Earth orbit, but as well MEO and GEO. So that would be quite new compared to other constellations. And two, as I mentioned, through security by design. So the ability to provide an ultra-secure, ultra-resilient service, that would be something new compared to other constellations. So voilà, we are now in the process of, we have started the discussion with member states when it comes to the legislative proposal. It will take some time. We think that we need to go this year through the legislative proposal, but with the European Parliament and with the Council. And on that basis, then we will be able to run procurement later on. Our plan is to already deliver initial services by the end of 2024, so quite rapidly. So that's about the space package. But what we need to keep in mind as well is what's going on in parallel as well. And here I'd like to mention two things. First, this idea of a space strategy for security and defense. You're very much aware, certainly. Background is the strategic compass that is being discussed by member states, and that should be adopted by the European Council in March. Here, the plan, I mean, the thing is, the objective is to ensure Europe resilience in space and from space, okay? And therefore, there is a need to develop such strategy for security and defense. And here, there are four key objectives, if you want, that I'd like to flag. One is protection. I mentioned that, the need to protect our assets. So, which is about capabilities. It is about as well crisis management procedures. So, you know, we have a council decision to enable us to take some decisions, some executive decisions. So this is very much about this. Two, it's about having the possibility to offer resilient services. more and more. I mean, you know that Galileo, we have the possibility to offer resilient service, which is the public regulated service. We want via secure connectivity to have similar service for governmental applications. But the question now is for Copernicus, Earth observation. I mean, this is an open question, but clearly as part of the reflection about the future of Copernicus, certainly we need to see how we can develop resilient services in support of governments as part of Copernicus. So that's the second line of action, if you want, resilient services. A third line of action of that strategy would be how can we foster synergies between space and defense? You know, this is an open question as well. But do we consider that we need to run space business and defense business in a silo manner, completely two different planets? Or do we want to foster synergies, make best use of taxpayer money, and again, take advantage of the synergies we can do? I mean, clearly the Commission would like to go that path to foster synergies, including through the use of the European Defence Fund. You know, in the European Defence Fund, we are already using it in support of space. We want to have a space window. We want to develop technologies that can be useful as well for the European Space Programme as part of the European Defence Fund. But clearly, this is something to be run on a more systematic basis. And then the fourth line of action is a reduction of dependencies, of technological dependencies. That debate is going on for quite a while, but clearly, I mean, post-Brexit, it was accelerated, and now with what's happening in Russia and Ukraine, this is clearly very high on the agenda. How can we reduce our technological dependencies? Not just on technologies, but services and goods as well. So this is the fourth line of action of that strategy on space and defense. That will be elaborated in very close cooperation with the High Representative, of course, and the EAS and member states. And very last point I'd like to mention as well in that broad picture is a new space. So we have in Europe, I mean, if you just consider what's happening in France, every week you have a new startup in the field of space that is created. So you see that, I mean, space is the new territory for guys willing to run new adventures. And this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity because those new actors bring new ideas, new technologies, new industrial processes. And this can be very helpful as well to enhance Europe's sovereignty. What's the risk here is that you know, they have a very specific way of working, of developing their business. And what we see today is that there are bottlenecks in Europe for such startups to grow up and to scale up. The first one is the fact that they lack private investments. You know, today in Europe, if you need venture capital funds to get equities, it's very hard to get them in the field of space. I mean, because those venture capital funds, compared to the US, are very risk adverse. They don't want to take any risk. So what's happening today is that we have many new space actors, startups turning to the US to scale up. And this is actually drain of our talents. And here we need to be, to revert that, to halt that trend, and to develop an offer on the EU side to ensure that our new space companies can develop, because they are part of the solution, they are part of Europe's sovereignty. I'd like to conclude by saying that you know, we have a clear agenda, as I told you, 2 drivers: resilience, innovation. We have space package. We are building up synergies between space and defense. we are stimulating the new space ecosystem, and that we're doing that together with the European Space Agency, and USPA. The beauty is that we have managed to stabilize the institutional architecture. We had difficult times with the European Space Agency. We had tension in the past, we had friction, but today we have managed to really stabilize that architecture with a very clear division of labor between the European Commission, the political body defining the ambition, defining the vision, European Space Agency, which is, basically the architect, and has the engineers, the know-how, the technical knowledge. So this is really the research and development body, if you want, the executive arm of the European Commission. And we have USPA, our agency in Prague, which is the agency in charge of running the constellation. So basically operating the exploitation of our constellations, and at the same time dealing with security. So that's the beauty, that we have now stabilized the architecture, which is very much needed to remain united, and as Europe to remain a space power across the globe. I'll leave it to that, and I'm happy to have a conversation with you.
Thank you for your presentation, Guillaume. I think it was very precise to detail the space package, because there are a lot of things, and as you say, a lot of things on different topics, which is space ecosystem, the governance of space, and also the defense aspect of the question. So now I give the floor to Andrea ROTTER, which is head of the division of Foreign and Security Policy at the Seidel Stiftung, and an expert on space question. Andrea, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for having me, and it's a real pleasure to discuss the space package. I have to make sense of all my notes I write. I've written down for so many informations coming in, but perhaps one or two quick comments. First, on my background, as Jean-Pierre has mentioned, I do research on security and defense policies, and of course there I focus on the geopolitical rivalries going on currently on the global scale, which also extend to space. So I'm certainly not an expert when it comes to technological details or industrial incentives, but certainly when it comes to the geopolitical rivalries that extend to space. And for that reason, my first impression of the European space package has been really positive, because I think for me it demonstrates that the European Union has become more aware of the strategic, geopolitical, and security role of outer space, and is also willing to integrate space in its overall strategies to become, or to position itself as, a more serious and more relevant geopolitical actor. I think French President Macron was absolutely right when he stated at the last summit in Toulouse that the European Union, or Europe as a whole, has missed many important strategic moments so far and has a lot of catching up to do. And I think that the space package is one important step of catching up. Guillaume said it himself, it's a little bit late compared to other major actors in the field, but better late than never, right? And if you can fund that as well, if we can attract private investments, but also if we can engage with our member states to really increase the investment, I think we're on the right path. My second comment is also of a more natural or more general nature. I think alone the process of discussing space in a strategic way is also important to form or reach a consensus within the European Union and among all member states, because when you look at how member states interpret or how they really see space as an enabler, but also in terms of the military dimension of space, for example, I think there are still vast differences in their approaches. So I really applaud the process in itself in a way to reach consensus. And I mean, we cannot really take space out of the current context. I think the crisis in Ukraine, or the war in Ukraine caused by Russia's illegal invasion, really demonstrated the increasing role of space as an enabler, but also the increasing role of a space as a way to project power in a global terms. And I think this is the right discussion we're having right now when it comes to space. I mean, just today, the German Aerospace Center announced that it will terminate all bilateral cooperation with Russia, and Russia's handling of OneWeb and the expected launches, which now will not really happen. I think they clearly demonstrate that we need to think about space in a more strategic way. And I also think that this discussion will continue when it comes to EU launching capabilities in the long term, for sure. Thinking about the secure connectivity initiative, I think it's really an important step to boost Europe's resilience and its vision of European strategic autonomy. Because as President Macron rightly stated, who controls space will control technology and also control the flows of data. And this is, I think, one of the major battlefields we'll face in the future. For me, it is also very important, and that's why I was really first critical, but now less critical, was the decision to include also small and medium enterprises and startups in the process of assessing whether this connectivity is feasible, or in what terms this can be actually done. Because, and I think Guillaume really mentioned that, we see in this geopolitical climate that different actors are really boosting the national space industries as a way, also, as I mentioned before, to project power, and also to spur technology or technological innovation in this field. And thus, I think we really need to enhance or think of better ways to engage with our private actors in terms of synergies, in terms of really boosting our private and public partnerships in this regard. And from a German point of view, of course, the decision to include startups and small and medium enterprises will be really welcomed. Perhaps to the European approach to space traffic management, I can say, although we have a new government which has not in Germany, which has not done so much on space so far, space traffic management and a European approach to space traffic management is really a priority of our space strategy so far. And given the major challenges we face in this field, I think a European approach is certainly noteworthy. And I also applaud the idea to make it capability driven, because everybody who deals with European Union issues, sometimes within the European Union, we like to talk way more than actually think about what kind of capabilities we need to ensure that we can actually come through with our goals. So I really applaud the capability-driven approach. But I really want to stress, and Guillaume has stressed it as well, while it is certainly a benefit or worth doing, reaching consensus within all 27 member states and within the European Union on standards and norms, I think we really should stress the importance of international partnerships, because given the small share of European satellites or the small shares of European satellite operators, of course, it is relatively slim compared to other major powers. So while, of course, it is noteworthy that we want to have a European approach and that we want to make the best use of our regulating power, I think it's really necessary to do that in close coordination, especially with the United States, which I know are rather skeptical when it comes to such approaches, especially if also the UN process should be integrated in that as well. But I think that we can really make a difference, but it should be done in a fast way, and it should be done in a way that is based on enough investment to actually have a voice at the table. Because as I said before, right now we have a lot of catching up to do, and this is a very important step. But this momentum, this impetus needs to be sustainable, and that's one way, or that's one thing where I really see we could have major problems. But with that, I'd like to end my short commentary, which was definitely longer than 5 minutes, and would hand either back to Jean-Pierre or to Gaspard for his comment. But thank you so very much.
Thank you, Andrea. Next respondent, Gaspard Schnitzler from IRIS.
Thank you, Jean-Pierre. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much first for these two very enlightening presentations. Firstly, I would like, as Andrea did, to welcome the two proposals which were made by the European Commission on space traffic management and on secured connectivity, as well as the Cassini Fund, which was put in place to support the emergence of European startups, which are, in my opinion, very important steps towards more EU resilience and more EU autonomy in space. Secondly, I would like to share with you a few reflections on the future of Europe as a space power, more from a defense and military point of view. So even though this is obvious, I think it's important to recall that the last few years have proven us that space is undergoing a massive transformation, and that it is becoming an increasingly contested domain. The recent Russian anti-satellite test, or even more recently, the comments on Twitter of the head of the Russian space agency, who was threatening to crash the ISS on Europe and on the US, remind us, if needed, this increasingly contested domain. So therefore, I can only welcome the statement of Thierry Breton, who say that Europe needs to defend its interest and freedom to operate in space. I think we all agree with this observation, but the true question is, I believe, how can we achieve a greater resilience in space, and what are the next steps towards a full integration of the strategic dimension of space. So here are a few lines of efforts which I believe should be pursued as a priority. The first one, as Guillaume de la Brosse already said, is achieving the adoption of an EU space defense strategy by 2023, as proposed in the latest draft of the strategic compass. This seems key to me. It would allow to share a common analysis of strategic threats and interest in space by European member states. And it would also allow to identify strategic capability gaps which needs to be addressed in space. Secondly, enhance our collective space situational awareness, so SSA, to prevent threats to European and to national space assets should also be, in my opinion, a top priority. To date, EU member states remain heavily dependent on US data regarding space situational awareness. So developing information sharing between member states and extending the current SSA infrastructures, such as, for example, the French Grave radar or the German Gestra radar, is, I believe, essential to reduce the EU's external dependency and to reinforce its sovereignty, which are two goals as was presented by Guillaume de la Brosse. So STM, space traffic management, is of course a good start, but the next step should be a space domain awareness, which in addition to only collision avoidance includes also the detection, the tracking, the cataloging, and the identification of space objects. A third priority, I believe, and this is also shared by the European Commission, is to develop the EU's ability to operate in space and from space. This means developing the resilience of space infrastructures, but also develop our common capacity to react against hostile actions in space. So this involves an enhanced operational cooperation, which can, for example, be developed through the organization of so-called space stress tests at the EU level, such as, for example, was what France organized the last 2 years with Asterix exercise. So this could be done at EU level. And it also implies an enhanced industrial cooperation to develop interoperable space infrastructures through pooling and sharing. And here I'm thinking about the example of what France and Italy have done, for example, with the Athena Fidus satellite they developed together. In the longer term, the establishment of a true European Space Command would facilitate the ability of the EU to conduct combined space military operations, of course, in a defensive approach to deter and to counter hostile space activities. And last but not least, not to be too long, I think the EU should be at the forefront of promoting responsible behavior in space by adopting and pushing a common position on this matter to avoid having others dictate standards of behavior in space. Thank you for your attention. These were our inputs. And Jean-Pierre, I give you back the floor for the questions and discussion. Thank you.
Yes, perhaps I will take the first question for the debate, and so Guillaume, you can answer to Andrea and Gaspard, but perhaps also take the first question linked to the actuality, which is the question of the links of the European space sector with Russia and the consequences. So there is a question which is, there is a gradual cutting of cooperation at the bilateral level from Germany and Poland, but what would be the status of the EXO, for example, for the ExoMars mission under ESA? So Guillaume, you are not a representative of ESA, but of the European Commission. So I don't know if you know if it is, this question is on the table or not still for the moment.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to thank Andrea and Gaspard also for the very good ideas that I've taken note of, because indeed, I mean, and let me react to some of your comments first, and then I'll take a question. So, I mean, yes, Andrea, I think, I mean, one of the big turning point now is that we see, not just the Commission actually, but member states as well, that we see space as a strategic sector. And to me, one of the turning point was the discussion that defense ministers recently had in Brest. They met at it was a FAC defense, so the meeting of all the EU defense ministers upon the invitation of the High Rep Borrell and Minister Parly, and they had a dedicated discussion on space. And what was very interesting to me was that it was not just, you know, discussion nice to have where you have a few suspects intervening, but actually you had almost 20 ministers taking the floor during that discussion, and everybody agreed about the need. You know, it's not a question anymore whether space is or not a strategic sector. It was really considered by all as a strategic sector where Europe needs to step in much more than what we used to do. So for me, it's now clear that you know, that strategic moment is already over, behind us basically, and we need to take actions. So that's clearly a very good news to see that we have this very strong backing, including for developing that space strategy for security and defense. But what I'd like to stress right now is a piece of paper will not make a big difference. I think what really matters is, as Gaspard outlined, some of the clear actions that we need to develop. And that's why we try to be extremely precise and focused in terms of what we want to do. It is not just a piece of paper. We want to, in parallel, already take actions and accelerate those actions considering what's going on. And here, I just want to pick up what Gaspard said. Space domain awareness, clearly, this is an issue we need to explore. We already had initial building blocks with space, with SST, but we need to certainly to go one step beyond and indeed to be able to do some detection tracking of what's happening and having a possibility to to operate things as well. So, and that's why indeed that was mentioned by Commissioner Breton. He mentioned this idea of a EU space commander at some point of time. And here, we need to start somewhere. And I think first we need to get the picture right. So that's why, we focus very much on this space situation awareness, because it's the starting point. You need to get all the info right before you take actions. So the first stage of that rocket, if you want, is the space situation awareness. But really, at the end of the day, it should lead us to some point where actions will have to be taken, including to deter and counter hostile activities. Then one point that you mentioned, Andrea, that indeed we are a bit late when it comes to the new constellation. But here, the way we want to catch up is through, not just copying and pasting what others are doing, but doing things a bit differently. And I think it's what we've done with Galileo. Galileo, we were very late compared to the US. And today you see that we have a system which is better than the US system. Now that's due to the innovation that we have put in the system. And I think it's always a bit the competitive advantage of the union. So, okay, we are late, but we come with very good ideas and innovation. And I think it's what we want to do as well with that new constellation. But clearly still, here we don't want to take too much time. We want to accelerate things. So let's hope that we can deliver initial services already in 2024. Then just one point indeed on the regulatory power. I think for space, we need to really tap into all the competitive advantage of the union, be it budgets, the ability indeed to establish norms. And we know that, especially in that field, the first one that will define standards will have an advantage and will give an advantage to its industry. That's exactly the same debate as the one we had for space as air traffic management. So it's about standard. The first one setting the standards will then give an advantage to its industry for developing the technology. So clearly there is a bit of a technological race there as well. And this is replying as well to Jean-Pierre about Russia. So indeed, so we are we are in a situation which is not easy because indeed, we had well-established cooperation with Russia in some areas related to space. I'd like to mention the launcher, of course. You know that for certain institutional launches, Galileo, we were relying on Soyuz. So that will not be the case anymore, because you have heard that the Russian Space Agency took unilaterally, and this is important, the decision to suspend its activities with Europe as a retaliation to the sanctions decided by Europe. I like to stress that this is not a mechanical consequence of the sanctions. This is again a unilateral decision of Russia as part of retaliation measures. So, but clearly, that cooperation is now put on hold. Commissioner Breton issued a statement to indicate that it would have no implications whatsoever for Galileo services and Copernicus services, because we have constellations that are already delivering very high quality and good services, and therefore there will be no short-term impact. But clearly, I mean, we are assessing what needs to be done, because of course, I mean, you know, we can suspend our activities for a while, but not indefinitely. So we need to find another solution, an alternative solution. That's something we are assessing currently. ExoMars, I think, and I'm not willing to speak on behalf of ESA, but ESA as well is in a difficult situation, clearly. I mean, what you need to know is basically that for the time being, the only international cooperation that is not suspended is the cooperation that takes place in the ISS so far. So let's see how long it will last, but for the timing, this one is not affected. The rest, everything is suspended. But that, I mean, you know, again, this brings us to the debate about our dependencies. Once more, I mean, here we had a really wake-up call with the pandemics. It's now a second wake-up call. I mean, no, we had three wake-up calls. One with Brexit, another one with the COVID, and now with what's happening there. So clearly, I mean, you know, year after year, we are learning about lessons learned, what's happening, and we are reducing our dependencies. It takes some time, but clearly you can see that there is a clear shift on mindset in Europe to reduce dependencies. And as I said, it's not just technological dependencies, but when it comes to certain goods and certain services.
Okay, thank you. On the question, there are a question, a global question on concrete action. Perhaps on the concrete action, there is this question on the role of the European Commission on the space strategy for security and defense. What will be the role of the European Commission? And I can say it will be a specific document that will be elaborate and published later, this space strategy for security and defense.
Yeah.
Of course, after the strategic compass will be adopted in by this month.
Yes, so the plan is to issue this. It will be a joint communication. Okay, so it's going to be a joint strategy of the European Commission and the HRVP. And two, in terms of my calendar, it should be by 2023, end 2023, but considering what's happening, I think there is a clear urgency. So I'm not sure we can afford waiting too much. I think we need to demonstrate that we are, taking this matter very seriously, and time is of essence. Yeah. So now the role of the European Commission, it's going to be jointly drafted. So we will have a role to play, not just in terms of writing the paper, but injecting ideas. We are, what we want to achieve is a very integrated product. We want to cooperate very closely with the EAS because we have great expertise to inject. We want, as I told you, we want to, we have, so we have ideas, but we have technical expertise, we have assets. And I think what needs to be clear is that this strategy will play a role. It will drive some actions in the future. So that's something to be taken into account. All these strategies, they lead to concrete actions, including at later stage, perhaps in terms of how you design the future MFF, for instance, how you define new projects or new programs. So clearly, you need to be very aware about what's going on and to influence the process. And a last one I'd like to mention is that we want to use that strategy to inject the defense dimension in our space infrastructures. So we all know that they are civilian nature, but still, if we want to develop more resilient services, as we did for Galileo, if we want to develop resilient services in Copernicus, in secure connectivity, it very much matters to have that clearly reflected as well in such a strategy. Voilà. So that's a bit the way the role we see for the European Commission. It's going to be an integrated product, so co-designed, co-crafted with the ES.
Okay, and the question of the EU Space Command could be in this strategy. There is a question: can the EU Space Command be used as a spearhead of EU?
No, I just don't want to use that term. No, I think and that EU Space Command, you know, I mean, well, the thing is, how can, again, first stage of that rocket is the space situation awareness. And how we can use all the information we've got on space and from space to feed intelligence at EU level as well. You know, we have what we call the INT-CEN, the Intelligence Center, and clearly they use today, from time to time, Earth observation images to run their products. But how can we feed in a more systematic way? We have huge amount of data with space, and the question is, how can we use those data in such a way that it feeds intelligence and decision making at European level as well? So that's really the first stage, if you want. So it's really, again, bottom up, so using space data up to the decision making. Okay, and then the last stage of that rocket will be indeed how you, from the top, take decisions on your space assets. But that is a kind of long-term aspiration, clearly. But if we can really have a kind of architecture at EU level where, you know, we articulate things very closely between the Commission, the ES, for that space situation awareness, that can be the kind of building block for developing it further, of course. But I would not use the term or use it as a spearhead of EU army. But that's not what's behind. No. We are much more pragmatic than that. We want to be efficient.
Okay, thank you for this precision, Guillaume. There is a question on the SST program by a question by Edouard Simon. SST assets are key when it comes to defense. Could you tell us a little more on how effective is the EU SST program, and if there are plans within the European Commission to enhance cooperation in this field and format?
Yes, so how effective it is? Well, it is because, I mean, you know, on a regular basis, we get information on risk of collisions, for instance, and therefore we have to take decisions on, you know, changing slightly the orbit of some assets, and this is happening already. So you see, and we get that information through the EU SST consortium. So this is already effective. But clearly, I mean, we want to use the momentum of this space package and the space traffic management communication to enhance the consortium different ways. First, to enlarge, I mean, today we have 7 member states that are part of this consortium. We want to enlarge the number of member states participating in the consortium to get more intelligence, to pool national assets and share more intelligence. 2, we want to further develop the capabilities of member states, you know, to have more robust and more powerful capabilities, and that we use the space research program to do that. 3, we want to reduce our dependencies on US information, because today, I mean, we very much rely on US data. You know, there are partnerships, so we rely very much on US data, and we want to basically not to be too dependent. It's a long-term aspiration, but we want to reduce a bit our dependencies vis-a-vis the US. And fourth, clearly, what we want to do as well is to to play a bit more with the private sector, to see what kind of services new space companies can offer, and see whether we can try to tap into the potential of the new space companies there. And then, sorry, a fifth element I'd like to mention as well. Here we want to build synergies with the European Defence Fund. We want to use EDF as well to develop certain technologies that could be further used then as part of the EU SST program. So as you can see, full menu.
Okay, thank you. To precise perhaps on this last point, could you imagine to have funding coming from different ways? So from the European Defence Fund, but also for other tools, whatever it is, EU tools or private tools to fund this technology. It's also linked to the question of the synergy, because the synergy, it could be on the technology, but also on the way you fund these technologies.
Yeah. Well, I mean, first, for instance, if we take the example of the European Defence Fund, this is about co-funding. So basically, it's really depending on which TRL we are. Normally, the principle is co-funding. So part will be funded by the EU and the rest by industrial consortia. So that's it. Then what I'd like to mention is that what we need to keep in mind is we cannot go for double funding. So one single project cannot benefit from different tools at EU level, because then we are going for double funding. That's something we can't do. But clearly, this notion of getting private, and the thing is that we certainly one efficient way to do things is to leverage private investment and from industrial sector. And clearly, this is a smart way to move ahead because you leverage private investment and you drive an agenda. So you coordinate a bit investment. So it's a good and smart way of proceeding.
There is a question of Wisconsin from Safran. Do we know what exactly happened to Viasat network recently?
I'm not willing to take this one.
Okay.
I'm escaping this one. Please, you will excuse me.
Other question from Lucy Lashkar. The aim is to inject the defense dimension into the EU space asset. Do you see any issues with the EU space asset remaining civil controlled? Also, they will constitute critical assets for the defense sector.
Yeah, here I'm happy to answer this one. I mean, again, to me, how shall I put it? The question is, does it make sense to have that kind of debate? Well, to put it very, very simply, if you look at what's happening, if we look at what is happening in geopolitical terms, if we look at the amount, the investment we are talking about when it comes to space infrastructures, and on the other side, the limited budget we have. So does it make sense to really go for silos between, civil and defense assets, and space and defense assets? And then considering as well the call for synergies that that comes from member states, from everywhere, that clear division between space being civilian and the rest we have defense, to me, on a personal basis, I find it quite outdated as a debate. Space, it's like cyber. Space is a domain, right? So we need to combine forces. And if you go, look, I mean, secure connectivity, we have put on the table an investment, an order of magnitude of what needs to be the budget required. It's 6 billion euro. Okay, Galileo, we've said it's roughly we have invested 10 billion euro. So the question is, I mean, does it really make sense to go for such massive investment and say no, it's just for civilian purposes? And that's a question we have with Copernicus. I'd like to be very clear. Copernicus today, we can't use Copernicus images in a war zone. So if you want to do some hotspot monitoring of certain areas in Ukraine, we cannot use Copernicus. So what's happening? Well, we have to buy commercial data, and from time to time from the US. Is it normal? I mean, we have Copernicus. I don't know how many billion euros we have injected in Copernicus. We are #1 in terms of Earth observation, but we cannot use it for what's happening in Ukraine, for monitoring certain situations. And in turn, we need to buy data on commercial markets. So does it really make sense? Voilà. So I think, to me, that debate is a bit outdated. It's not the right approach. For me, the right approach is how you can combine different needs. The thing is, we are not going to pollute infrastructure with defense needs, but how we can secure stuff that really meets defense purposes. How you can have certain part of the governance that meets defense purposes. So there are smart ways. And here what I'd like to say is that Galileo, we're not starting from scratch. Galileo is a clear demonstration that a program can be of civil nature, but offer highly and secure public services as well for defense ministries, clearly. So we have a clear demonstration that this is feasible. And this model, for me, can be imported for other programs. But I mean, just to respond to Lucy, clearly, I'm not saying it's going to be an easy debate, because that debate will be there, clearly. But to me, I think if we want to be up to the challenge, and if we are really serious, and if we really open our eyes about what's happening, this is not even a question that should be raised.
In fact, it's a core question of the synergies, because at one time the question of the program, they have to be, in fact, civil military built by design at the beginning, in order to take into account the two requirements. Don't you think?
Yeah, no, clearly this is really the purpose. But here again, I think, you know, you have theory on one side, but you have practical ways to address it on the other side. And again, I'd like to stress that Galileo PRS has demonstrated the pathway, how to achieve that. So this is something to be done, to be replicated. Okay, perhaps we have since 10 minutes, perhaps Gaspard or Andrea, do you want to ask more questions or to give comments on the answers of Guillaume? Andrea.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's an interesting debate. Perhaps before I give my short comment, my question to Guillaume would be, because he stressed the strategic compass, do we really see the strategic compass passing in March? That would be my big question mark, given the current situation. But perhaps what I want to stress in my short comment is really the importance of a European security and defense strategy, as Gaspard has rightly pointed out, where we define common interests and a common level of ambition, and of course our common priorities. Because what we see on a national level currently, we have a lot of actions taken by France, by the United Kingdom, by Germany, by other actors. So there's a lot of national actionism going on. but still you can see there are quite differences in terms of defense strategies when it comes to space. For instance, the French approach of active defense when it comes to our own space critical infrastructure, of course, might be a different approach than the German approach. Everybody knows that we're quite reluctant when it comes to offensive counter-space technologies. Also, I think what we currently see also within the European Union are quite different levels of technological progress. So that's why perhaps I'm a little bit more hesitant when it comes to establishing a space command, because we have so many different approaches on a national level, on a NATO level, for instance, where we now also have a NATO space policy. And we have also pretty much exclusive formats, for instance, the Combined Space Operations Initiative. So what we currently see is a lot of actionism on the national, but also on the multilateral stage. And I think that's where we really need to be smart about it when it comes to the European Union. We have limited funding in all member states. We have a single set of forces in military terms among our member states. So I think we really should be smart about that and everything. And I think the space defense strategy will be or has to be the basis about being smart, being able to be perhaps complementary to other efforts, especially with NATO, for instance, and avoid unnecessary duplications, because I think there's a real danger in that we see with the level of actionism going around these days. And perhaps if I can answer to the question of Rhys Lasson, I hope I pronounced that correctly. My French class is way back in my past. I think one of the major problems we currently see is it is very similar to the cyber realm. We do not really have a defined threshold, what constitutes an act of war or what constitutes a casus belli in this regard. I think when it comes to NATO, we all know that an attack on our space systems or space critical infrastructure can trigger Article 5. But in the end, it's up to all member states to decide whether a system or whether an attack on a system constitutes Article 5 worthy aggression or not. And I think this is also perhaps something where European members can come together, or European Union members can come together and perhaps define not really a threshold, but really think about how to respond in a proportionate way to aggressions against our critical space infrastructure. And I think that's also why the debate we're going to have on the European security and defense strategy on space is of a very fundamental nature and a very important step. But I've talked too long again, I'm very sorry.
No, thank you. To raise the question for all the attendees, because they have not don't see the question. So Andrea raised the question of Brice Lançon. The first one was, generally speaking, is a cyber attack on a space network asset a casus belli, and the second one is jamais a satellite signal a casus belli. So no, Gaspard. Yeah.
Thank you, Jean-Pierre. So Guillaume, you pointed out the importance to reduce our dependency on US data regarding to SST, which I totally agree. But the thing is, you need sensors, you need radars, and only a few member states in the EU have such capabilities. If you look at the US, they have the so-called space fence, which allow them to cover almost the entire globe. So my question is, how could or how will the Commission support the development of such capabilities by member states?
Okay, Guillaume, for the last.
Well, the sky is the limit, huh? So no, I mean, of course we have limited resources, so we'll have to play with the boundaries that we all know. But let's see clearly. I mean, we want to enhance our ability, and we need to enhance that ability well, the intention is really, let's say, in the upcoming years, to drastically reduce our dependencies on the US. But again, it's at the end of the day, l'argent est le nerf de la guerre. So at some point you need the investments, and if we don't have investments, we'll be quite limited in terms of what we can do. The strategic compass passing March, Andrea, that was your question. Well, I mean, you say, you know, I mean, one of the key points of the strategic compass, and it was presented that way at some point, was to have that kind of security and defense white book or strategic paper. So I think it will. Because as you rightly said, I mean, if we want to avoid national fragmentation, everything starts with the appreciation of the threats. And I think one of the key points here we'd like to demonstrate and to show that there is some unity. And it starts again with the understanding of the threats, and on that basis defining what we want to do. And I think the beauty of the strategic compass is exactly that. So of course it is a paper, but it has a beauty to demonstrate once more that Europe is united there. And as such, I mean, it is a symbol, but it is a very strong symbol. And today that sign of unity is very much required in the strategic context. It is not sufficient, really. And I think it is important to stay tuned, because what matters, of course, needs to trigger some further reflections on what more Europe can do to enhance its defense. But clearly the strategic compass is part of the picture. Voilà, Jean-Pierre.
Okay, thank you, Guillaume, and thank you for all these the panelists for this conference on the space package. Perhaps one information: our next event will be the seminar we will organize in Brussels on defense innovation. It will be the 29th of March, and it will be with the chairman of the European Defense Agency and other people coming from the different MOD, Ministry of Defense in Europe, and we will present also our series of papers, of RS papers on defense innovation. So next event, and I hope we will see, not in Visio, but in situ, all the attendees. Okay. Bye to everyone, and thanks to another time to the panelists.
Thank you very much, Jean-Pierre, Gaspard, Andrea. Have a nice day.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to everybody.
Bye.